We often speak about aging in a really sort of negative way. What we are doing here actually is we're one of the only home care brands. In fact, I think we're the only home care brand that actively champions that active lifestyle and really thinks about activity, movement, thriving in your later years. And it's not about being the last chapter, it's the beginning of the next one.
This is Matt Helton with OneTrust Home Loans, your reverse mortgage experts, and you found the Serving Seniors podcast. That's where we highlight those businesses and those individuals that help seniors not just survive, but thrive in retirement. And today we have another one of those awesome people. We have Mr. Amrit Dhaliwal, and Amrit, he is the CEO and founder of Walfinch, and they're revolutionizing the way in-home care is done all over the UK. He's going to share with us how he's doing it, why he's doing it, and what he wants to accomplish here in this business. So, Amrit, how are you doing today?
Very good, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on. I was just thinking about our rally cry, which is "Time to Thrive." When you were saying
awesome,
about surviving and thriving, that is our go-to mission.
Wow, you're meant to be here. I'm glad we found.
It looks like it.
Yeah, glad we found each other. Well, maybe could you give us some background? It's always interesting to hear, first share where you're from, and then maybe what you've done in the past, and give us the journey up to CEO of this company, why you're doing this.
Great. And so I'm Amrit, the CEO and founder of Walfinch. Walfinch is home care franchising. So we have national coverage around the UK. And I started my journey as a restaurant owner when I came out of university. So I live in London. I grew up in London. And when I left university, I worked for about 8 months, and I thought, gosh, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this.
Yeah.
And I then got into the restaurant game at 22 years of age. And I bought a going concern, ran that for a little while, then did the next thing, which was a tea room, and then had a few other sort of projects around that catering piece. And I stumbled across franchising in the home care space in the UK. And it was my now wife, my then girlfriend, who recommended buying a home care franchise. She's a dentist by profession, and her family business has been in nursing homes for the last 40 odd years. And so in 2012, I bought a home care franchise. But almost immediately I thought, is this it? If McDonald's was doing home care, is this what they would do? And so I learned everything I could learn, built that business, sold that business, and then started Walfinch. And really our mission with Walfinch is to talk about redefining home care, thriving in those later years, where we often speak about aging in a really sort of negative way. What we are doing here actually is we're one of the only home care brands. In fact, I think we're the only home care brand that actively champions that active lifestyle and really thinks about activity, movement, thriving in your later years. And it's not about being the last chapter, it's the beginning of the next one.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit what you mentioned about the only that does more active and keeping them. So maybe tell us more about that. How did that become part of your focus, and then how does it work?
So I've always been very active myself. I was a competitive weightlifter, amateur bodybuilder when I was growing up, and so I've always been really interested in movement and activity and really thinking about that whole piece. And I was out with my father, who's now 74 years old, and I thought, gosh, it's a few years ago, and I thought, when my parents come to that age and home care is presented to them, what will they think? These are guys that are pretty active. They hit the gym and, go on holiday, and, they're very kind of social and so on. But then I look at home care as it's classically been delivered, and it's wiping bums. Mary comes in, gives you medication, goes out, comes back, makes you a sandwich at 12 and, puts you to bed. Yeah. And I thought, these two things, they just don't connect anymore. And I think once upon a time they really did. Now they do not. And when I think about the guys that are kind of approaching that age and stage now, they want something very different. And so I set about, that was the kind of the trigger point for me. But then I set about changing the way that was delivered. So we have an activity promise within our visits. So, for visits of an hour, we really try to drive a 10-minute piece of activity with our service users, our clients. I also really think about how we market our operations in the first place. So one of the things that we drive all of our franchisees around the whole country to do is to develop a Thrive Club, which is a free community club where anyone, and invariably they are older people, that come along to these clubs to help omit loneliness and to drive activity. And that might be Pilates, chair yoga, floristry artists, and so on that come in. And it's a whole host of things that we do. But really, what that means is that people are moving, they're thinking about movement, we're talking about movement. Just simply doing a few squats and building the quad muscles up means that you'll less likely to have a fall, which means that you're less likely to break a hip, which means that you won't be hospitalized. And invariably, it's that hip replacement or that broken hip at 65 that gets you at 85. Sure. And it's the kind of chain reaction of things. And so we're trying to fix that.
Yeah, that's excellent. Now, since you guys are focused on movement, is your average clients maybe younger than other companies, or do you try to get to people earlier? Maybe tell me more about that.
So really, it's a really interesting point, Matt. By default, that tends to happen to us because with a lot of home care companies, they're positioned in a very different way. They think about, well, okay, what is it that your mum needs, Matt? She needs beds, she needs a shower. Okay, great, we can do that. But then, what that tends to mean is that she's at a much more critical stage. What we tend to find is that someone might have been coming along to one of our clubs, and then they've had a bereavement. The spouse has passed away, and Mr. Jones is saying, well, actually, I'd quite like someone to come and play golf with me on a Wednesday. Or Mrs. Jones is saying, well, actually, I'd quite like someone to come and watch TV with me, once a week or whatever it might be, or go out for a walk with the dog and so on. And so we're getting engaged with people at a much earlier life stage and time in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so we're really sort of working on that piece, but I'm sort of quite obsessed with service as well. And I really often think about, well, what is the service that we're providing for the rest of the family? And so the technology piece that we work with allows the family to log into the notes, see what mum's been up to, and so on. Because actually, and where that really came from, so we worked with our tech provider for that to happen. But I remember when my eldest daughter is 7, and when we first sent her to nursery, I was able to have these pictures and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why are we not doing this? This is basic, right?
Yeah. That is awesome. What about, and I was going to say, if you're currently watching this podcast and you didn't catch from, he said UK, he said London, they definitely caught it when he said wiping the bum, that you're not in the United States, right? Different word choices. So I definitely caught that. Now, somebody might say that once in a while, tongue in cheek, but that's not normal American language. So that was awesome. That was awesome. Well, that brings up a question. Have you studied or any crossover of like what home care is in North America versus what you guys are doing? And is there any crossover?
There's a lot of crossover, and that's on our time horizon in the next sort of 6 years or so, I'd say, to enter the US market. I come out there at least once a year. I've got lots of home care franchisor friends and spend a lot of time with home care providers out there. What I tend to find is that a lot of the home care market in the US, or certainly more of the home care market in the US by percentage than the UK, is also healthcare tasks, so nursing and so on. That is probably about 10% of our market. It's a much bigger percentage with the US.
Okay.
There's various reasons behind that. One is that we've got the NHS, and actually that it becomes we don't have an insurance system here in the same way, and so it's the access to all of those things is different. One of the things I find really interesting about the US market is that I think that some of that thought process is slowly tripping into the UK market, and what we're going to see in the next 10 years is a much more healthcare-driven business in the UK. I think that is really where that whole piece is going. I think we'll be doing a lot more nursing at home and so on. We do a bit of it, and certainly at Walfinch, we have trained nurses on our books as well that actually support with that piece. But it's not the predominant thing that we do.
Makes sense. And so you're mostly all private pay, not the
predominantly all private pay, and that is only because we are. What is really important to us is good quality service, making sure that our people are paid well, and often that means that we're forced to be in the private market. I wish there wasn't a two-tier system.
Yeah,
there is. Fortunately.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it sounds like from what you're sharing, it almost sounds like if you got people that have a little maybe above middle class that understand about being healthy, keep moving, maybe instead of being 75, like a lot of the companies, maybe you're having people that are just recently retired, 62, 68, people coming out of the gym. Maybe they still go to the gym, but they want a little extra attention at home.
And that is it. And really, we're talking to people about what is your 10-year activity plan? What do you want to be able to do in 10 years' time? Pick up the grandkids, tie my shoelaces, play golf. Whatever it is, it means that you're going to need a certain level of muscle mass, of activity that is required today, because there is a natural deterioration process that happens over that period. And so it's really helping us kind of make that front and center. Now, of course, we also do all of the bread and butter work, sort of helping much older people just stay safe at home and stay independent at home. And we have a big hand in sort of work that we do around dementia and so on. But my fundamental point is that is base level within the market.
Right. Yep.
What else is there? And I think this is the what else is there. I think this is the kind of our North Star.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I guess, is there anything that, as you got into this franchising, anything that you've uncovered was different than what you expected, maybe better, maybe worse, but what have you found out about franchising and this business that's been different than you expected?
I suppose my big thing is when I started franchising, I came from being a home care provider myself.
Okay.
And what I assumed was it was a continuation of what I was doing. What I quickly realized was they were two very different businesses, two very different operations, two very different people that were involved in that. And that was a slight shock to the system. I wasn't expecting that. So I effectively... I'm no longer a home care provider. I'm a franchisor, and that is a very different hat.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm assuming that means that you're not, you had your employees and you had your clients that you were real focused on. Now you're really focused on who's the owner, who put up the money, who do you got to keep happy, right? And those are your franchisees.
And that's it. And really what you're trying to do is impact the end user. Be that the carer, the client, the client's family. And we can do that en masse through the power of franchising.
Wow.
And the interesting piece for me is that, I still own a few of my locations, but I'm not actively involved in them. We've got wonderful people that run those. But I think the thinking is very much about, how can we drive impact?
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, maybe could you tell a couple, I'd love to hear a couple stories on maybe some clients at your home care companies that you met, situation there and how you've improved their situation, and then maybe some folks that you've been able to impact at the franchise level.
Well, I'll tell you a fun one, and then I'll tell you an interesting one, both from one of our Thrive clubs. So there was a lady that used to come into Thrive clubs on a regular basis, and I went along to one of these said clubs, and I hadn't been to this one before, and I heard her talking to the branch owner, and she was like, "Cam, so love coming here, but where are?" This is I think she must have been sort of knocking around the 80s, and she's like, "But where are all the boys?" And I thought. I thought how fun, because actually, this is truly a social event, and maybe there is a possibility of finding romance and so on, and I thought that was both. It was humorous in her delivery, but also it was hopeful in the opportunities that we were creating for
Wow.
the community, and I thought that was really wonderful. The other really fun one was. We had a lady, Rita, her name was, and she used to come along to one of these clubs, and then we also used to provide care for her, and what happened after 3 or 4 months of coming along to our Thrive clubs, she said, well, actually, I no longer require care. I'm only going to come to this club because
Wow.
actually my mobility has moved. And so I don't actually need the care bit, but I want to keep coming here. One, because it forces me to do some activity. Two, it forces me to get out of the house. And three, everyone is my friend. And I
Wow.
think that, really is on one hand, it's counterintuitive when you're trying to grow a business, but on the other hand, that is exactly what we're trying to do. And
Wow.
so I thought that was really a really intriguing part of it.
That is awesome.
And on to that effect, I then have more recently become an ambassador for the Royal Osteoporosis Society,
Okay.
really trying to push the agenda of think about osteoporosis, and that is it's something that anybody can get at any life stage. And so I've really started looking at more how can we impact the change through that, and again start talking about activity, trying to normalize it, and so forth.
That's great. That is great. Well, as we're starting to wrap up here, if there's someone watching this, who should they forward this interview for? Who's your best clientele? Who would you like to reach through this message?
Really, I mean, I think actually, if there is an older person in your life and you're thinking they need a bit of motivation, hopefully some of the things here, may have motivated them to say, well, actually, I'm going to do something.
Yep.
And it might not be, I might not be lifting 120 pounds or whatever it is in the gym, but
Yep.
I'm going to do something. And,
Okay.
and I think, we're all about doing the something, that 1% change. So very much directed to that person. I speak to a lot of different parties in my day to day, with franchising and with the care provision. So really that whole suite of people is quite an interesting piece. But certainly do reach out on LinkedIn or wolfinchfranchising.com or whatever it might be. There's lots of resources and lots of great things that you can tap into.
That's fantastic. So is that the best places to connect with you, on the website
Yep.
and
Well, the
LinkedIn?
website wolfinchfranchising.com,
Okay.
on Instagram. I'm basically on all of the socials, but Instagram and LinkedIn are probably the two places I hang out the most. I have a book that is called Time to Thrive, The Home Care Revolution. I have my own podcast called Walking with Walfinch. It's a walk and talk concept, very much staying in the
Okay.
activity piece.
That's great.
So pretty easy to get hold of.
Okay, that's awesome. What I really like about what you guys are doing is we know that there's an epidemic of over medication, and that can lead to depression, and people have all kinds of things. And I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, and I don't think you are as well. But you've probably seen a lot of examples, especially with your activity, that one of the best ways for people to pull out of depression, concern, etc., is to just start moving, right? And they can
Yep.
get off medicine, right? So this
Yep.
activity. So I love that you guys are promoting activity, which is going to help mental health. And then the other side of a lot of people's mental health is financial strain. And that's where we come in, because, so many people, elderly, have lived in their home for so many years. It's all paid off. They have a lot of equity, but they're so concerned about finances. We have clients all the time. They have 300, 400, 500,000 in equity in their house, but they don't have any money, right? They think they don't have any. So that's what we do, is we help seniors. We show them how they can use a small percentage of their home equity to pay their taxes, pay their insurance, have awesome services like you have, just to be able to leverage that.
Yep.
We had a client that she called recently after the closing. She called and it was like a long silence. So she called from the closing, and usually a call from closing is not usually the best call. Long pause, and she had a frog in her throat. She said, "All I can tell you is thank you." And I said, "Well, thank you for working." She said, "No, no. I've been thinking about this, stressed out about money for 2 years with your name and number on my desk. And I can just feel the weight off of my back, right? Because now she has no mortgage payment. She's got money in the bank and she's living stress-free. So I'm just so appreciative of you being on here, just sharing about the movement and doing all that, because it's helping mental health. And then we can work on the financial side of helping people de-stress their life, because those two things together are going to help them live a much longer, fruitful life. And like we said, thrive in retirement.
Absolutely. I very much agree. And it is very much a time to thrive, not to just survive.
Yep, exactly right. Well, as we wrap up, anything that you'd like to share, anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
No, I think, the only thing I that you could have asked me is really, where do I see it going? And really what I'm hoping that we do here is create a movement for movement. And I think that's really what I'm after. If I think about the 10-year goal, where we'll be hopefully at 200 locations around the UK, be moving into the US, really what we're trying to do is deliver that message to every corner. And it's about kind of movement, and it's about getting other people to join that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I love your vision, love your goal. Hopefully you do twice as much of that. But if you do even half of that, it sounds like you'll impact a lot of people and change a lot of lives. So that's exciting.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on.
Hey, thank you for your time, sir. I really appreciate it. Hope to have you back sometime.
I hope so. See you soon.
Thank you. And thank you for watching the Serving Seniors podcast, where we highlight these awesome businesses and people that help seniors not just survive, not just get by, but thrive in retirement. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next episode. Hey, this is Matt Helton with OneTrust Home Loans, home of retirement mortgage solutions. And we really do appreciate you checking out the Serving Seniors podcast today. Now, please go to the description down in the body of the podcast where you can subscribe to get future shows. Please click that notification button so you get notified when other shows drop. And also, if you can go to servingseniourspodcast.com, and we'd love to hear a comment about our show. We have a heart to serve seniors, and we have a heart to make sure seniors don't just survive retirement, don't just get by in retirement. We want to show seniors how to thrive in retirement. So if you know of anyone that's 55 and older that could use some extra cash flow, maybe the retirement's not going the way that they like, our retirement mortgage solutions are designed for folks, and depending on the state, they're either 55 or 62 and older, to make sure that they have that kind of retirement that they want. As long as they own a home and they're in a good equity position, there could be some solutions that they may not have thought about, or maybe they've thought of and they just didn't know how they work. That's what we do. So anyone in that age group that could use some mortgage advice, my team and I would love to be able to help them. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you on the next show. Have a great day.